Let's go ahead and get started. This session will focus on the intentional collaboration needed to support parent voice leadership. Today's presenters will share their community-driven projects to strengthen families and communities through Indigenous culture, language, and leadership. And it's my honor and pleasure to introduce our presenters, Lucy Little Wolf Arias from the Minnesota Department of Education, Barb Faber and Tammy Finn from Indigenous Visioning, and Nicole Nieland from the Ojibwemotaadidaa. And I'm sorry, Nicole. Please forgive my pronunciation of that. And so Nicole will introduce herself when she starts speaking and let you know exactly how to pronounce that. Lucy, and I want to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sally. I'm going to start sharing screen. I don't have permission anymore, I don't think.
Okay, 1 second, Lucy.
Mm-hmm.
Try now.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Yes. All right. Well, thank you, Sally, for introducing us. I'm going to be speaking with you all today about the collaboration in Minnesota between federal, state, and tribal organizations, and a story of equity for Minnesota tribal families. I'm going to greet you all with a Ojibwe greeting. And I'm just going to, just for you too, Sally, I am a language learner as well. And it's important for us to learn our language. Each word or each phrase that I learn, I feel more connected to who I am and who I am as an Anishinaabe woman. So I can be there for my community. So bonjour, Lucy Arias, Indigenous Maingin Indudin, White Earth and Blackfeet Nations in Dujaba. I'm coming here from Minnesota, which is home to 11 tribal nations, 7 Ojibwe nations, and 3 Dakota communities. Minnesota is the home to Ojibwe and Dakota people and many other tribal nations today. So thank you all for joining us. So a little bit, we're all here because Minnesota was awarded a preschool development grant. We were awarded also the planning grant, which was in 2019, calendar 2019. And then we were awarded the renewal grant, which is a 3-year, $26.7 million grant, ending in approximately December 31st, 2022. But we shall see. It's been the time of COVID, and things have not started and ended as they should. But a lot of great work is going on around the state. So like I mentioned before, there was an intensive community needs assessment that was done around the state via surveys, listening sessions, many iterations. So they would collect information, analyze the information, go back to the communities, and again say, is this what we heard? Is this what you were trying to communicate? And so there was this whole cycle that happened. And some community findings that were uplifted that led to some of our activities is families were saying they wanted more culturally specific services to meet their needs, and tailored supports needed for the families. So, supports for families of young children, supports for families with children with disabilities, just more tailored supports. They wanted support from their communities of color. So they wanted to be able to go to people who look like them, who share values with them and share different cultural aspects. And this led to the collaboration between nonprofit organizations, counties, and tribes. And this is a neat infographic, but any of you who are also preschool development grantees know that not everything is always neat. There's lots of other work going on in the state of Minnesota, but these are the 4 top that are the main activities for our preschool development grant. And the first one is explore technology support. So really utilizing, this great word of tech that we have to really help coordinate services and help family access services more easily via technology. And another portion of that is the Help Me Connect, which is an online database of all the services across the state of Minnesota for children and families. And then the delivery system of that is these local community hubs. But we're here today to talk about investing in communities in the Community Solutions Grant. And this was a grant that was made possible through collaboration, not only with the federal government, but the state of Minnesota as well. And before I get more into the community solution, I just wanted to touch a little bit more about equity for Minnesota tribal families. So Minnesota, like I mentioned before, is home to 11 tribal nations. And in this last legislative session, it had existed before. It's called Tribal State Relations, but this last legislative session, it was codified into law. The state of Minnesota, when interacting and working with tribal nations, it's a government to government relationship. It's similar to if Minnesota is making a collaboration with Wisconsin, it's a government to government relationship. All our PDG grants are a relationship with the federal government. So it's the same concept applied to our tribal nations. And there's tribal state relations training offered to state agencies to really facilitate that. Also in the preschool development grant, like I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of community engagement that was done. And then also from that work, they really felt there was a need to have a person who was there to be that bridge between tribal nations and community organizations. And that led to my position, the preschool development and tribal nations lead. Another component is we are embarking on an Indigenous evaluation. A lot of times when there's large scale evaluation done, the Indigenous voice, the tribal nation voice is usually lost in it because we are such a smaller proportion of the state. And so our needs, our concerns, and our teachings to be shared in these evaluations are lost. And so through this grant, we are also embarking on Indigenous evaluation of the work. So really quick, community solutions, it just didn't all come from anywhere. Like I said, there was intensive community engagement around the state and all 11 tribal nations. And you can see there's tribal nations in the way northwest tip all the way into the southwest of Minnesota. So we live across the whole state of Minnesota. It was also done in the urban areas. A large majority of American Indian people live in the urban areas. And in Minnesota, that would be Duluth and Minneapolis and St. Paul areas. So there was a grassroots organization by the name of Voices and Choices for Children. And they worked really hard. They also did their own community engagement and they go, what do our families need? How can we deliver these services to families? And so this grassroots group of individuals really did the work. They did a lot of the legwork at the state legislature and were awarded some money. And then Minnesota was awarded the preschool development grant, which doubled the money. So it could be more impact across the state of Minnesota, which came to our Community Solutions Fund. Which is actually administered out of the Minnesota Department of Health, Center for Health Equity. It is governed by the Community Solutions Advisory Council, which is a group of 12 individuals from across the Minnesota and represent the cultural diversity of the state. The RFP was built around building communities' capacity to promote child and family well-being. And projects are all community designed and led. There are 23 grantees that represent the diversity of Minnesota, and 9 of those grantees were American Indian organizations or tribal nations. So here we go. This is the collaboration. There was Voices and Choices, the federal preschool development grant, which led to the community solutions. And then today we're going to be sharing 2 of the projects, Indigenous Parent Leadership with Indigenous Visioning. And I'll try to do better, Nicole. Ojibwemotaadidaa Grandma's House with Fond du Lac Community College. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton to Barb to speak more about her project with Indigenous Visioning.
Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you, Lucy. Barb Faber, White Earth Ojibwe member here in Minnesota. And so who is Indigenous Visioning? Indigenous Visioning is an organization that I created few years ago to work with tribes and within Indian country and partners. So our goal is to positively provide positive resources and opportunities for children and families, and with the main goal of supporting parents and children, and to learn from tribal leadership on the needs as well as community members. And we know that tribes are the experts of their communities, and they must lead and have say in everything that goes on within their communities. Next slide, please. So one of the projects that we're really excited about, and Tammy's going to share more information on that in the next few slides, but this one has been something that I've been working on for several years to get to Indian country. It's the Parent Leadership Training Institute, which is an evidence-based curriculum that started out of Connecticut. And while there was one other tribe that did incorporate this, we are really excited to bring it to Indian country. And we have two communities that we are partnering with to bring this in there. I've been on multiple committees and, national and regional committees. And we're always talking about working, doing things for the community and for parents. But we're just about every committee, we're missing the parent voice. And so this initiative hopefully is going to bring that parent voice within each of the communities. And so parents often don't realize they have a voice, or they're maybe intimidated to use their voice. So this really empowers the parent on the child development, on the advocacy, on their own personal advocacy, on their own leadership, skill building, and how to use their voice. So we're really excited to bring this. The other thing that it also brings, though, and we know that the boarding school era really erased and diluted our culture and our language that should have been passed on to multiple generations. And so there's many generations that weren't privileged to grow up in a traditional home. And we know that the culture and language is a healing factor. It's also a protective factor in Indian country. And so with this project, we felt it was very important to bring that cultural foundation to this training. And I'm really excited to be, a grantee of the Community Solutions Fund. It is like none other that I've ever seen. And, kudos to Minnesota for really putting their money where their mouth is, by having positions such as Lucy's on staff is, unheard of, a tribal liaison. And I think Minnesota has multiple liaisons in their government branches, which makes sense because they have 11 tribes, federally recognized tribes in the state. And so the funding is unique, the position like Lucy is unique, and we feel this initiative is unique. Next slide, please. And so I'm going to let my colleague Tammy kind of take over on the next few slides and kind of explain the project to you. Tammy?
Hi, everyone. Honored to be here with you all today and let you know what we're doing with our community solutions funding. So Indigenous Visioning created a partnership with the National Parent Leadership Institute and Dr. Anton Troyer, who is a tribal member of Minnesota. He's a professor at the Bemidji University here in Minnesota, and a language speaker. And we have decided to pilot this project with two nations in Minnesota, the White Earth Nation and the Red Lake Nation, to hold a parent leadership initiative that doesn't just include classes, but really connects the community and, like Barb said, helps parents find their voice and learn how to use their voice. And we'll talk about a little bit about that in the next slides. But the project takes place over a period of 22 weeks. There'll be a retreat in each of the Red Lake and the White Earth Nations. There'll be weekly classes, 20 weeks of weekly classes, and then a graduation ceremony at the end. Each of the 20 core program training sessions will each be in between 4 to 5 hours. And the core training program consists of parent leadership training through the National Parent Leadership Institute, and also the Indigenous Foundation's curriculum. And the partnership with Dr. Anton Troyer consisted of him developing this Indigenous Foundation's curriculum that will be used in coordination with the Parent Leadership Institute curriculum. So the PLTI, what we call it, Parent Leadership Training Institute curriculum, consists of 20 weeks that are broken up into excuse me, 2 separate sessions of 10 sessions each. The first 10 sessions focus on parent leadership and self-perception, and the second 10 sessions focus on civic change, government, and policy. Just want to mention also that another piece of adapting the Parent Leadership Institute curriculum is there are tribal government structures. So we are going to be adding information in that second 10 weeks around not only state and federal government formats, but also tribal government. And then each of the 20 sessions will include a 1-hour session of Indigenous foundations. We will also be providing supports, financial supports for families to participate so that they can take the time to be there at these sessions, and also providing childcare and meals. Next slide, please. So the Community Solutions Grant is meant to be community driven, and this definitely is a community driven project. When we worked with Dr. Anton Troyer as he was developing the Indigenous Foundation's curriculum, we came up, along with Dr. Anton Troyer, came up with some questions to take out into the community, talk to community elders and community members about what did they feel were important aspects of the Indigenous Foundation's curriculum. And that feedback was used to help Dr. Troyer develop that piece. The trainers, facilitators are all from their tribal communities. We have 3 facilitators from Red Lake and 3 facilitators from White Earth. They've been certified to facilitate the PLTI curriculum, as well as meeting with Dr. Anton Troyer to go over the Indigenous Foundation's curriculum. And one of the encouragements Dr. Troyer gave to them all is, yes, he did develop the curriculum, but he is encouraging the facilitators to really present, building on their own experiences in their own communities. So it is more personable and familiar with the participants. The other piece that is community driven is each nation has established a civic design team where we have a minimum in each nation that of 5 members to the civic design teams, and they'll guide our project coordinator in helping to make this project a success and make it connected to what their community feels is important. And then the civic design team will also be selecting the 20 parents to attend this cohort. Parents actually need to apply to be selected and approved to attend this initiative in the classes. So just a little bit about each of the curriculums and what their topic areas are. The Parent Leadership Training Institute curriculum, like I said, has 2 phases of 10 weeks each. And the first phase, you can see the topic areas for the first 10 classes that surround parent leadership and self-perception. And then the phase 2 talks about civic change, government and policy. And I believe classes 14 and 15, for sure, there might be another one, are the 2 modules that will be adapted to include the tribal government processes and policies. The Indigenous Foundations curriculums, much of what tribal nations do with their work is based on the 7 grandfather teachings and based on seasonal activities. So this is how Dr. Troyer developed the Indigenous Foundations curriculum based on the seasons of spring, summer, fall, and winter, and spring really being the infant stages of learning, and going on through summer, growing, maturing, and finding wisdom throughout the year. Next slide. I think Barb is going to finish up with the rest of our project information.
Thank you, Tammy. So as you can see, it's a very comprehensive curriculum. And of course, we have to indigenize it for tribal communities. And of course, you know, including the tribal government. For those of you that may not be aware, tribal governments have their branches of government just like any state or federal government. And because we are a sovereign nation, you know, tribes are a sovereign nation, they do have their own system. So we hope that parents will understand the tribal system, the county, state, and federal systems. And again, we are supporting them and nurturing their knowledge so that they'll be able to know, you know, how to use their voice. And after they graduate, which is a formal graduation, and they also do a community project in order to utilize their voice and their newly tuned skills and knowledge. And the community projects are can be small, they can be large, and they are supported in that process. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think that's it for us. And I'll anticipate any questions that you may have after this. We're really excited and we know it's going to be impactful for these communities. And we hope to continue it on to other tribal communities as well. So, miigwech.
Miigwech, Barb. Next will be Nicole Nieland from Ojibwemotaadidaa.
Bonjour. Gaga kegi jugu koin indigenous cause mkizin into dam. Mush kazivin into Jaba. Nindan no ki. Ojibwemotaadidaa Omaa Gidakiiminaang. Mouth is feeling dry already. I am Nicole Nieland. As Lucy said, I introduced myself in a traditional Ojibwe greeting, where I shared my Ojibwe spiritual name and my clan and where I'm from. And then at the end, I said where I work. So at the top, it says Ojibwemotaadidaa, which really means let's speak Ojibwe together. And we are a language revitalization program. We didn't start with babies and parenting, so I'm going to kind of share our beginnings and kind of how we progressed to that place. But we started in 2010 when 3 young Ojibwe women graduated from University of Minnesota Twin Cities, and they graduated with Ojibwe language bachelor's degrees. There's a language program there. And those 3 ladies finished and they wanted to continue their learning. They wanted to also provide a space for other people to learn as well. And they wanted to do that with first language speakers, which are typically elders. So they, you can see on the bottom here, on the left is the logo for Fond du Lac Tribe, and on the right is Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College logos. They are who we are under now, and helped us in the beginning for when these ladies approached and tried to figure out some funding to get things kicked off. So they had a year of planning and came up with an adult residential immersion program. So it started off as an adult residential program. So what we do is we teach initially adults. In this picture, you can see this is where we started to do the transition. You can start to see some little ones in there. But initially for several years, it was adults only, and completely 100% Ojibwe language. And so we rely on our elders to be the teachers, and the goal is to connect the elders with our students so that they have language resources, and then they also get a very authentic language learning and cultural learning experience. And these 3 ladies are some of our elders, our first language speakers. They are really the backbone of our program. Every decision that's made in the program is either approved or comes directly from the elders. As we continue to grow and do other things, they are heavily a part of our decision-making process and guiding us. Let's see, I don't want to forget anything. Our students come from all over. We have a really rigorous application process. They have to complete an application. Part of it is in Ojibwe, and part of it is to show their dedication to the language. So we want people who are going to dedicate a lot of time, if not their lives and careers, to learning and speaking and then passing language on. And as you can see here, they become very, very close. They become their own cohort of how to communicate with each other. They start texting each other when they're not in in our camps and so forth. And it looks like they're predominantly young adults here, but we do have people who of all ages that apply. They just have to be an adult. Okay, so this is, we have, I'll talk a little bit on the next slide, but this is where we are located. So we have on the left slide is the Cloquet Forestry Center in Cloquet, Minnesota. We utilize that in our winter programming. And then in the right is our Ojibwemotaadidaa, which basically means Anishinaabe or Ojibwe house. And that's where our base is for our offices too, but also for our summer programming. And that's located on the Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College campus. Next slide, please. We have two camps. We have a winter camp and we have a summer camp. And the winter camp is a weekend program where students apply and get accepted and then come one weekend a month for 6 months. And it used to be Friday night through Sunday evening. And then they would stay at wherever at the cabins that are located at the Forestry Center. And then in the summer, we have initially was a 3-week program. And then it has been more recently a 2-week program where students come and live together in the college dorms at Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College for the 3 weeks. And we are really get the point across that it's really important to only hear and speak Ojibwe while you're there. So pre-pandemic, we actually had students put away their cell phones and agree to just only access them a certain time frame during the day. And of course, there was opportunities if there was an emergency or something like that. But we really want them to live in the language with the elders and in all aspects of the day for that short time that we're together. Okay, next slide. As you can see, we do everything. We try to do everything and give the students an experience of everywhere that they go and whatever they do, from wrapping Christmas presents to cutting up a moose, to playing board games, to grocery shopping, to doing art and traditional crafts and so forth. We do everything in the language with the elders. Next slide, please. And this is a photo of Dr. Brendan Fairbanks from University of Minnesota. So not only do we have elders, first language speakers on site to be the teachers in all areas, we also have a linguist professor who's on site as well, who teaches grammar classes, because as second language adult learners, we found that the importance is really there for people to understand the grammatical structures and the complexities of the language. So he has a kind of a silly hat on, and that means that he's allowed to speak English and explain something. So probably a student asks something that they didn't understand that maybe an elder said, and he put on his English hat so that he could kind of explain a little more in depth what the elder said. Next slide, please. So that led us to, over the years, 200 some alumni, and they started to have babies. And so then that's where this came in. We started to have babies and thought, well, now we have to figure out a way to have support for parents and continue learning, and then also create a 3-generational setting where there's elders, first language speakers, there's parents who are second language learners, and then there's babies. And our program includes actually prenatal to 5 years old. So even if a woman is pregnant, she can participate in our program, and our babies can hear everything that's being talked about while within the mother. And so we didn't necessarily follow like a regular kind of daycare programming, because it was really important to do things for through our Indigenous lens, and of course with our guidance and support of our elders. And it was also really important to have the parents be a part of the programming. So it's not a daycare where you drop off your child and they hear Ojibwe all day and then you pick them up. It's really encompassed into that the parent brings the child, and they're there together at that time. So we provide a stipend to parents so that they can focus on their language learning and focus on spending time with their young child and learning together, instead of having a different job. Like for myself, I couldn't do that because I had to have a different job, and you send your kids to somewhere else. So this was a whole mindset of babies and parents learning together with elders. And also because parents needed to also then take that language home, we've dedicated time and session to things that they would do at home with their babies. So changing diapers, feeding time, taking a bath, all those activities the elders provided teachers with the language and vocabulary and how to talk about those things at home. So the goal was then to also have the parents bring that language to their home, and hopefully that entire family would start speaking more Ojibwe at home. Next slide, please. So the program started, the Grandma's House, the Language Nest started shortly before the pandemic. And we have 6 families, and oops, my dog. So then when everything happened, with everything else happening, also we're like, how can we provide language opportunities and resources for families while they're at home? So I'll show in a couple of slides about what we did with that. But then now we've started since August, started doing more in-person outdoor learning. So we haven't opened our doors of our Grandma's House building quite yet. So you can see these little girls on the left are learning how to shuck corn, and they're going through the whole process with their parents and in the language, and learning all about how to do that. And these 2 little girls on the left, the one little girl with the baseball cap, she I think she's 2.5, and she's speaking Ojibwe predominantly right now. And so that it's not only important to have them involved in everything and hearing everything, but it's time sensitive too, because she's now at the point where you can kind of decide, the children kind of decide whether they're going to predominantly speak one language or the other. And so she's showing signs, and we're trying to create an environment so that she goes towards speaking Ojibwe more naturally. And actually her Ojibwe is stronger than English right now. And the little girl on the left comes from a trilingual family. So she's speaking Ojibwe at home, and both of her parents can speak English, but her dad speaks Ojibwe and her mother speaks Spanish. So she's she's immersed in 2 languages at home. And then I think, of course, just hears English as she goes about her day. And then on the right, just to be together, any kind of opportunity for families to meet somewhere and go hiking and do things together, and everything is practiced in the language. And you can see that the elders are not present here. And so we're still working really hard to keep them safe so that that nothing happens with them, but also the parents have opportunities of, they meet with the elders online on Zoom every week and talk about things. And they also have a grammar instructor every week. And they work on that. They also are provided with parenting type classes and child development classes. And we're also working on, if anyone is familiar with Rye and Waldorf philosophies, we're trying to provide them with opportunities to learn different philosophies and parenting opportunities and styles. So next slide, please. Lots of baby photos at the end here. And because of the social distancing and trying to be safe and outdoors, there's been lots of opportunities to do local field trips. So these babies are sitting at the top of Hawks Ridge in Duluth. And so they've gotten to experience local places and hear the language about the different locations of the areas and so forth. Next slide, please. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we were trying to provide resources for families, and that became language kits. So language kits comprised of a book or books that were in the language that everything had to be created. And so, and then activities and vocabulary for the parents to practice, and because all of our parents are second language learners, so they may not know the vocabulary for a certain type of activity or time of the year. So those kits were created and the parents were able to do those kits with the babies. And it was a kind of a together kind of kit. And now as we get together, the kits are coming out and they're doing activities together. So I think they're doing like a tracing of a leaf or something like that. Next slide. And so we started off as an adult residential immersion program. We've also transitioned to now having the parents and babies in the grandma's house. And throughout all of it, we've worked really hard to document and provide resources for people and document elders. So you can see Coco Jones here is a first language speaker from just across the border in Ontario near Fort Francis. And she's, this is a YouTube video. So we have a YouTube channel and she is talking about trapping. And this is a woman who has trapped her entire life and can just talk about it all day. So what better opportunity to learn how to do something than to hear someone who's done it for 50, 60, 70 years. So we have a YouTube channel as well. We give our students and our parents multimedia files. So if they're going to go to the garden or a greenhouse or something like that, they'll receive multimedia files on the language and different things and how they can practice and learn how to talk about things so they can grow their vocabulary. Okay, next slide. So that's about all I have. This is our, we have our website. We're close to getting a new website, but I think we'll have a thing to direct people to the new one, but that is our organization's email and my email if you have any questions or comments. And in the upper right-hand corner, you can see our logo and our Ojibwe, all of our animals and birds and all of creation has a job or work that they do. And that little yellow bird that you've probably all seen is known as the keeper of the language. So that little yellow bird is a part of our logo because she is the keeper of the Ojibwe language. So that's why we have her a part of our logo.
Thank you, Barb, Tammy, and Nicole for sharing so much about your projects. And again, these were community driven and led projects, and really we're funded because through the needs assessment and really listening to communities. Community solution funds, like I mentioned before, there are 23 unique projects going around the state, and 9 are tribal nation or American Indian led. And I will say the American Indian led projects are based in the culture and the language. And it's very important that we reclaim that. We reclaim that for our communities and most importantly for our children and the generations to come. So thank you all. Now we're going to open up for some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing, and please either, I don't know if you guys can get off, unmute yourself. You can unmute yourself for a question or put it in the chat. So we'll start this portion. All right, so I'll go to the chat and see. It said, could the website be put in the chat? Yes, I will try to multitask here and put it in the chat. I'll put both Indigenous Visioning and Ojibwemotaadidaa in there. And so miigwech, and thank you. But I'm going to ask, a very wise woman said, you know, we all are just like processing information and thinking about what was just presented to us. But we really want questions. We really want to hear what you guys are thinking and what you would like to know more about, because PowerPoints are great, but there's so much more. So I really encourage you to either unmute and ask a question or put it in chat. I'll give you, I'm going to look up those 2 websites to put them in chat for you guys. But really, I would like to field some of your questions for our group here.
I have a question towards the last presentation, the last slides. You mentioned that was St. Regis. Is that correct? Is that upstate New York? Was that the YouTube channel that you had mentioned?
Our YouTube channel?
Yeah, there was another, you had mentioned I thought St. Regis towards the end of the last PowerPoint. Maybe I'm confusing the 2, but you have a YouTube channel, correct?
We have a YouTube. We have, I think I can look it up really fast. I think
okay,
it's Ojibwemotaadidaa, but let me just double check. But we have a YouTube channel, and we have a lot of resources on our website, and we're in the middle of getting a new website. I think we'll probably have it up and running the first of the year, and okay. We'll have more resources on there, but you can listen to elders speak and you'll hear differences, because even those 3 ladies that were sitting there, they're from different parts of Ojibwe country, and so they may have a little different dialect in the way they talk. They may have different words that they use, but a really good resource is Ojibwe People's Dictionary that's out of University of Minnesota Twin Cities, and you can there's a search engine, you can search in there in either Ojibwe or in English. So if you want to learn how to say something in Ojibwe, you type in the English, and then at the bottom you can hear different speakers say it from different parts of Ojibwe country. So it could be Manitoba, it could be Ontario, which right. How large Ontario is. Minnesota, Michigan, and we're considered, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan were considered Southern Ojibwe dialect, kind of, when people talk about it. And then there's Northwestern, which is kind of Manitoba and Northwestern Ontario, and then Southern Ontario is more towards like Toronto. But then there are Ojibwe people all, in Saskatchewan too. So yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thank you. I definitely would like to, yeah, if you could drop that in the, already did drop it in chat. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, so second call, we really want to filter your questions. I have some prepared questions as well, but really want to give you guys the opportunity to ask Barb and Tammy or Nicole or even myself questions about our work here in Minnesota.
I wanted to just add something, if that's okay. So when the state of Minnesota was working on their PDG grant, they really wanted to know what communities are thinking and what they need. And so they worked with a lot of organizations, ours included, to go out into the communities and find out what the need is. And they collected that information. And we were also able to support parents for attending those sessions and spending time, because especially in rural areas and high poverty areas, that's very important to, just like Nicole said, to provide supports to your families. And, if you really need them at the table, they've got a lot of priorities. And so, and sometimes not all the resources to do everything. So it always helps to provide, either a stipend or transportation or childcare or meals for families to participate. But so we went out there. We went out into the 11 tribes, 10 of the 11 tribes, to collect information. We brought that back to the state, and the state gathered all the information, and then we brought that back to our communities to make sure that is what they said, and that we heard it correctly, and we brought them their information, but we also brought them all the information. And then, so then we went out there a third time to bring back their feedback from the second meeting with them, community meeting. And then we, brought them the same information. And so it was a very comprehensive community needs assessment, one I've never seen in the 30 plus years that I've worked, in tribal government. So I really appreciated that, and the parents appreciated that. And I think the parents, were kind of shocked at first, and they were, and on the evaluation, that's what they said. I felt so honored to be asked what I thought, and so that meant a lot. And so we got some really good answers and responses and feedback from that process.
And it's not intended to end. I mean, I think the way things are now with COVID, like this convening in itself is virtual. But we know those feedback loops of gaining information from the community is done best in person. This is a good venue, but we know, like Barb said, there's lots of competing issues, and families don't always have access to this. So really, it's the intent of Minnesota to continue this work moving forward, and it being an integral part of how Minnesota does business. But I do have some questions for you guys, because nobody has a question. I will ask again. I said 3 times. So really quick, you guys, what would you share with other state leaders who either there are established tribal nations, but we know not all tribal nations around the country are established. There's lots of communities in urban areas and some unrecognized tribes as well. What information can you share with state leaders to encourage increased engagement with tribal nations? So Barb, Tammy, or Nicole, what would be some feedback you would give to state leaders?
Just to get out into the community and ask the questions. That's what this community solutions grant, I think, is really unique again, because it's for BIPOC communities, and it was designed for BIPOC communities, but it was designed for BIPOC and by BIPOC communities. So we understand the needs. The grant itself, the community needs grant, it looked different from any other grant I've ever submitted, and the grant reviewers come from BIPOC communities, so they understood that we needed a different process because the other processes could be very intimidating. But I would encourage all state leaders just to get out into the communities and really look, and talk to your BIPOC communities and, and find out what their needs are. And it's also helpful to have, somebody who's asking the questions look like people in the audience. So I thought that was very, thoughtful and mindful of the state to ask Indigenous people to go into Indigenous communities, because they'll probably get, real answers and maybe not, just what you want to hear. So I thought that was great.
I think one thing I would say too is to do some research, learn about what does tribal sovereignty mean, how do tribal governments run, get familiar with those kinds of things if there's any kind of training out there, so that it's not so intimidating to start those connections. But like Barb said, you just do it. You just need to start the connections, and it goes from there, and everybody learns together, the tribes and the stakeholders learn together. So, and Indigenous people and communities, people of color are part of the community, and they just the connections that you make just make that all the richer, for your entire community and your state.
That reminds me of another question I had about the tribal state relations training. What did that consist of? I know the parent leadership project training was like a 22-week course, but could you talk just a little bit about what that looked like, or what it looks like?
Well, I just put into the chat a link to the page, and it's actually done at the Department of Transportation. I haven't had the honor to go to the full tribal state relations, but I've attended two, and it does exactly what Tammy says. It gives you some history of the tribe and the creation of the tribal nations. It gives history on the U.S. federal Constitution and the government relationship with the federal government. And then it also dives deeper to each tribe, because each tribe has their own history, their own cultures and different ways of doing things as well. And then it gives, I think, like case studies of why it's important. And that's my basic understanding, but it's a 5-session training. And I think they're doing it virtually now, but prior to COVID, it was in person, and it was done at in the different tribal nations, and tribal nation leaders came and presented because they felt it was really important to share this information.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, third call, questions from the audience. Thank you, Becky. So for that, we'll move on to our next lesson. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I had a question. I'm sorry, my thing was off. One, I wanted to know, when you built the YouTube channel, was there like a theme that you created to kind of get cultural practitioners out there, to make the videos, and like how do you, like, Okay, so in Hawaii, it would be, I'm just trying to think through if there was a way to make a YouTube video that was like pointed towards early childhood, but also, I mean, channel, sorry, that was pointed towards early childhood, but also was thinking of the cultural practitioners out there that might be willing to make, you know, the videos. I just wondered how you built it in terms of when you were thinking about the themes of like what you were going to ask and how you got people to buy into it, to make it. And then my second question was more of an equity question, and just when you're getting Indigenous people to the table, are you able, is there anything that you're doing that's kind of helping to understand their value in a way that maybe has been taken away from them through kind of systems? You know, I mean, it's sometimes here what I'm finding is there's almost a denial of like that oppression is happening, or that there is inequities. So like having the like more real conversation that like this is maybe some of the reasons why you're not ready to come to the table or trust what we're asking of you. And so kind of a bigger conversation. But
Yeah, honestly, that's a part of our application process. And part of it is not weeding people out. It's, there's a lot of trauma and a lot of, like you said, healing that needs to happen, and everybody's at different places, right? So for one, there are, it's, I don't want to say common, but for lack of a better word, there are several people who are maybe ashamed or embarrassed that they can't speak their language, so they don't choose not to come to the table or to even put in an application. And then, so it's a big step for, and because it's kind of a rigorous application, if we receive an application from somebody, we know that that took a lot, right? Like they're either in that setting where they're in a language setting already, or they're just really just throwing it out there and hoping, you know, for the best. But when we do when we get our applications, we go through an interview process as well, and we talk now with, of course, we talk with everybody on Zoom, and we ask them questions in English to kind of just ensure that they're ready for what they're gonna kind of embark on at the program. And then we also ask them some questions in Ojibwe. But like I said, it's not to weed people out, but it's more of people have gotten into an immersion setting with elders and people that are kind of a little bit more comfortable speaking, and they've panicked or had like really not so great reactions to it. And then, you know, the last thing you want is for someone to leave and to never see them again. So we're really intentional and cautious with how we work with our applicants. And I don't know if that specifically answers your question, but I think just thinking of, we just went through an application process now that, you know, it's a big deal for people to take the step to learn language. And then even if they're taking the step to learn their language, to know that they're going to be in a room with people who speaks better than them, or that kind of stuff. And it's a lot of processing and working through some inner stuff. And you may not have answers to that because, like you said, things that have happened in historically, we believe in blood memory. So even though I didn't directly go to boarding school, I have the results of that running through me from my grandmother that went through boarding school. So that is a part of it as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but, oh, and then the YouTube. So the YouTube, we did it on site. We did it with our elders that were there, whatever topic was happening. When we started to focus more on parents and babies, you can see some videos where that elder Coco Jones, I think there was a picture of it, has a little baby, it was my nephew, has him laying in a cradle board in a Tikanagan. And she's talking to him, and she's tying him up, and she's talking to the people around, the adults around, and explaining why we use those cradle boards. And some people think, oh, why would you wrap them up so tightly or whatever? But part of that was what we're creating at the grandma's house at the language nest is the focus at times is on the babies in the programming at the language nest, but it's really to have the babies present, right? So the elders and the parents are still doing kind of like adult activities. And if it's an infant in a cradle board, their shoulders, their hands down are kind of like wrapped up in there, but think of what they have to utilize to stay focused is their senses, right? Their vision, their hearing, their smelling. So they're taking in and they're absorbing so much more because their hands are not free. And then the other part of it too is we found that babies that are wrapped up in a cradle board are they become just calmer, more relaxed children. I can go to a ceremony and a little kid would be sitting there just really calm, and probably 9 times out of 10 that little boy or little girl was in a cradle board. And it's just really just some of the things that we've noticed and observed. But the activities are just really whatever's happening. We're documenting and videoing elders nonstop just to try to preserve their sound more than anything. And because especially still probably in Ontario has still several speakers and still communities that still speak Ojibwe, but it used to be you could run into somebody on, somewhere, and they could start talking and you would know exactly where they're from by the sound of their Ojibwe. You could understand them, but you could tell where they're from by the sound and the melody or the rhythm of their language. So it's that fine-tuned where people say, oh, you're from Lac La Croix, Ontario. You're from wherever, Shoal Lake or something. And it's just, they don't even have to say it, but you can tell by the sound of how they speak. So we're trying to hang on to that too through documentation.
And then I was going to try to tackle the second part of that question. I think you were talking about when state leaders or governing bodies come together, correct? Okay. So, and I think this is from my experience, the awareness that we're still here, the awareness that we still have our language and our cultural ways outside of what the outside looks like, right? A lot of people associate powwows and this, that, or whatever with natives, but we're much more deeper than that. Our culture is much more rich than that. That awareness is coming up, and it's unfortunate that it's coming up from the work of the Truth and Reconciliation in Canada. The discoveries of bodies at the boarding schools. It's risen to that level, but Canada is not alone in that. There's the same history in Minnesota, and even across Indigenous people across North and South, South and Central America, and all over the globe. That awareness that we're still here. The Indigenous people are still here, and our culture and languages are still here. I will say, with that awareness in the business of Minnesota, if it is a gathering to discuss, to bring Native people to the table and to discuss the needs and the strengths of Native people, that we'll start things in a good way. And it makes me hindsight, I should have did a better job of that. And that's when we would invite a spirit helper or an elder to come and to start it off in a good way. And sometimes that is through prayer. Sometimes it's sharing wisdom, but that is becoming more common. And I think that grounds people in the knowledge that we're still here, we're living, breathing Indigenous people with a distinct culture and a rich language and rich communities. But that's beginning to happen. And it also, on the other end, it's the good thing. It's the representation. You know, we have Deb Haaland, who's the, is the Secretary of the Interior, which is land, which is the governing body over American Indian issues. I mean, that alone, the land governed American Indian issues, that alone says a lot. But also in the state of Minnesota, our Lieutenant Governor is Peggy Flanagan. She's a White Earth Nation member as well. And just really elevating that we're here and that, we have a rich culture and language to share with everyone. So I think, just in my lifetime, it wasn't always that way. And just seeing it. And like Nicole said, a lot of the speakers are the young ones, or, to me, they're young adults, but it's there and it's growing, and it's very hopeful time.
I think I just want to say something too about the why we're so excited about this parent leadership project, because indigenizing it, adding to the civic change conversation that PLTI brings out. We've pulled together the Indigenous foundations, and I think before people, Native people can use their voice, they need to learn about who they are. And like Nicole said, some people are on different levels. Some are really immersed in their culture, and some have lost that because of the boarding school era and historical trauma. And so this Indigenous Foundations curriculum is the basics of Anishinaabe people and what it means to be Anishinaabe. And as people learn that, they get stronger and more familiar, and they're able to use their voice in, state committees or community, starting out in the community, maybe the school board or, whatever, and moving in a forward direction as they become stronger in learning who they are and how to use their voice, working with state committees, state governments, federal governments, that kind of thing. So I think the equity piece and the language piece that Nicole's program is pulling forward, along with the parent leadership training and learning, those civic design and Indigenous foundations focuses. I think all of that through the community solutions granting is going to really build and strengthen our throughout the state.
Thank you for your question. So do we have any other questions? Otherwise, I have another question for our community, for Barb, Tammy, and Nicole. All right.
If I would also entertain any if the other states that are on here with their PDG, what are they doing with their Indigenous communities? What are some of the initiatives happening out there? I personally would love to learn what's going on across United States on that front. You can either email me or say it today, whatever. I'm always happy to learn. I know the Bipartisan Policy Center is working on a state tribal webinar. I think it's going to be part 1 and part 2. So, and we're always interested in learning about what's happening out there.
Yeah, so either unmute yourself or put it in the chat if your state works with tribal nations or Indigenous people. We'd appreciate that. All right, well, I do
Barb,
have a,
this is
oh.
Becky again. Barb, sorry. I think we might have something that we put together at Health and Human Services, just, looking through the grants. I think this was something that we had thought about. So if I can look back to see if we have anything, I'll share that with you as far as which PDG states, are working with Indigenous and what they're doing, and you could reach out to them.
all right, well, I guess I have a final, oh, was somebody going to ask a question?
I was just going to respond to that. So in Hawaii, we do have the PDG grant, but it was not. I think at this moment it's not funded. I think we're just working on the strategic planning of it. As far as work that I've done in the state, it's with the Early Childhood Comprehensive Systems Grant. So similar, but not the same. So I just wanted to speak to, we do have the PLTI here as well. And then through the ECCS grant, the community grant we did here in Maui County, we really tried to bring family voices to the table. We have a different history than you folks. We also have there's kind of a different collective. There's a lot of people disagreeing voices amongst Hawaiians and Native people here. We're trying to kind of figure that part out. Everyone has a different opinion of sovereignty and all sorts of things. So we have, and like you said, we have people, we have an immersion program. So we have people who are very immersed in the culture, and then we have others that are super, super disconnected. So trying to figure out how to get voices from all parts and have them equally valued. And then also trying to compensate for being at meetings. But our biggest lift with the ECCS grant was to try and get family voices at community meetings to understand kind of what collective impact is, to understand kind of what their voice would be like to have there, other than, we have family engagement at agencies, as everybody kind of has seen, but it's hard to get them in a community collective and kind of understanding that bigger idea of how driving policy, how their voice can help to drive policy. And it's confusing to me too. So I trying to help everybody understand it better. And, but most of all, like helping the voice be lifted, their voices to be lifted in this valued way that also doesn't start to, where there's not a power differential at these meetings that can happen sometimes when someone's trying to help support and onboard in advocacy. We have to be careful not to get to the point where we're also kind of in a power position with them because they're so grateful that you're kind of helping them to find their voice and be there at the table and valuing and supporting them. But then I think the other side of it is they feel this like need to, they kind of owe you or they trust you so much. And so then you get to I'm just thinking kind of through how to make sure you're never kind of abusing that power of like that their voice never becomes something that you're kind of using as a tool or that they're feeling like indebted to you. So that's why they're there. So so we're kind of trying to find a balance of how to really bring value to their voice and give them gift cards or stipends or whatever we can to make sure that they feel like a monetary compensation for also being there. We're all being paid, so we want to be that, but we have to create a system that kind of creates that all the time. So the PLTI does that, but it's not just for early childhood. So anyway, I've spoken a lot. It's just, there's a different social history here that we're trying to navigate as well, where language and land are super important, but because not everybody's on the same page and you guys feel, it seems that you guys seem much more unified in kind of where you're at with things. So I guess I'm just trying to learn from kind of what you're sharing and how you're choosing to do it.
So when we started, just prior to PDG, Indigenous Visioning and a group of some state people, some foundation people, we set up a tribal early childhood core, and where we met with tribal council and their early childhood leaders, and just to raise that conversation, and we listened to their successes and their challenges. And you know, then we had the opportunity to do the and where we got to meet with the community members and parents, like I said earlier. And there was common themes across both of them, where culture and language is important. And of course, the early childhood workforce. Um, there's such a childcare and early childhood crisis uh, going on everywhere. And then that they want services in their community, so they don't have to go. And then just kind of talking about that instructional or structural racism that's out there. And so uh, listening to leaders and listening to parents, really gave us the insight of where what we're doing now. And I met a lot of people that went through that, the PLTI. And there was people from all backgrounds. There's people that were just parents who wanted to have a voice and get involved. There's parents that lost everything due to drugs, um, that were homeless, that were fleeing domestic violence. They were all backgrounds. And to have their collective voice. And we know, I'm preaching to the choir here, that we know that, by the parents are the child's first teacher. And so we know the benefits, of having parent involvement. It increases, the children see the benefits of that in their cognitive development, their academic performance and their social emotional um, and skills. And so we just want to nurture that with parents, because parents do feel, that they don't have a voice. And so I really, again, say kudos to the state of Minnesota for taking that initiative and saying, no, we want to know what parents want. And we want to know what leaders want in tribal communities and BIPOC communities. It wasn't just all tribal. So, and they went out and asked and they heard, and they're using that to guide their work. So appreciate that.
Thank you, Barb. And thank you again for your feedback and willing to share with us. Thank you. I won't even try to say your name. I want to though. So now, thank you all for joining us. We're honored to present with you. And I believe Sally has some wrap up.
Thank you very much. This has been a great session and lots of really good conversation. And I would like to follow up to say that based on some of the conversation and the feedback and Becky's offer to look at some of the things that states were doing with their PDG money around tribal relations and those types of things and family leadership, we can definitely look into that more, and maybe reaching out to participants and not just the presenters of this session, but actually participants to see what types of follow-up TA or assistance that we can provide through the PDG B-5 TA Center. So be thinking about that because again, we're here to provide opportunities for you guys to learn. And we want to make sure that we follow up on this really rich conversation. Also, I'd like to again thank to the presenters for sharing about the intentionally collaborative community-driven projects that use Indigenous culture and language and leadership to strengthen American Indian families and communities. And also before we go, I would like to share 2 places that you can get additional information about PDG and some more of the topics and information covered during all of the sessions in the convening. I'm going to stick the link to the PDG B-5 TA Center website in the chat. And so you'll be able to find many different resources that'll help states strengthen and enhance their birth through 5 mixed delivery system. Also, just letting you guys know, all of the sessions are being recorded. They will be posted on that PDG Center website as soon as they've gone through an approval and 508 compliance. Those will be posted. It'll be probably at least 6 to 8 weeks because that does take some time to do that. However, just to let you guys know, if there are sessions that you missed that maybe you still want to tap into that information, that will be available. There's also another link that I'll be putting in the chat that you can find many different resources, and it's an online library of policy relevant research, and it contains information again on the topics that we're covering during the convening. So thank you again and enjoy the rest of the convening.